What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the eCommerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Brawner, and today I've got an awesome interview with Joshua Uebergang. Joshua has been a member of the coalition for a couple of years. I got to know him as from some of his posts and some of his insights he's dropped in there. Today, I want to bring him on the podcast to talk a little bit about some of the changes in his business. He has become a master of processes and has taken a ton of what we've actually, like some of the content in the coalition and instituted in his business. He talks about what type of an impact that has had. So he talks about hiring. He's built a team of 8. He talks about standard operating procedures and how he uses them, tools, iOS 14. He runs Digital Darts, which is an agency based in Australia for Shopify, growing Shopify stores, and shares a lot of insight into just like how to run a better business and what it looks like. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. And if you would love to be a member of the coalition and get access to some of the stuff he's talking about, you can head over to brandgrowthexperts.com/coalition. Become a member. I've got tons of training in there and would love to help you out. So without further ado, let's bring in Joshua to the show. Hey, Joshua, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Austin. Looking forward to chatting with you and sharing.
I'm excited to talk to you. I have gotten to know you through the coalition and your many thoughtful contributions in there. It's fun to actually get a chance to talk and learn a little bit more about your business. I know you're on the kind of the front lines working with clients and growing e-commerce businesses. But I would love to hear, kind of kick it off with, what are you most interested in right now as it pertains to e-commerce? Or actually even outside of e-commerce? What's most interesting to you right now?
Yeah, definitely post iOS 14 apocalypse has just stirred the pot completely. And that has seen, some clients so we focus primarily in Shopify stores, e-commerce, and they have not been affected at all. So it's not even a blip on their radar at the moment. But then at the other end, there's a spectrum where some have just been devastated. Yeah, so in that, my interest has shifted to, it's made us better marketers, and I think it should make you a better marketer as well. And so actually properly understanding attribution and the data side of things, as well as finally exploring into lesser known channels. So I'm starting to TikTok, Pinterest, big 2 really, Facebook and Google. And so being able to flush out these, as a digital marketer, it's really great to test and see huge results from these. And yeah, definitely channels that I think every business owner should be focusing on. Well, at least testing once you've got your initial couple that are showing traction.
For sure. I'm interested in it. So I have traveled through Queensland last year, and before we hopped on, you were kind of telling me that you're a couple hours to the west of Brisbane in Queensland, which is pretty far out there from any other like tech hub. But it's interesting, in the coalition, there's a bunch of people that are from Queensland. How did you get started and interested in e-commerce marketing and in e-commerce?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 steps, I would say. One, I just happened to fall into e-commerce working in agencies prior to Digital Darts. I think it's quite a common trend, and heading up their marketing. That last position was Magento, and certainly got to see the forefront of the headaches that Magento can provide. So this is 7 years ago, so no Magento 2. Yeah, from that, towards the end of that agency relationship, I had always I saw what was being done and wanted to start my own team in that. And through a guy called Brendan Dunn, I got to meet a mutual friend, Kurt Elster, who was fortunate at mentoring me. I focused on e-commerce, but Kurt had pointed out this growth in Shopify, and knowing the importance of niching down, taking it from marketing, e-commerce to Shopify, and that yeah, that was 6 years ago, and certainly thankful to Kurt for that.
That push in that direction. Yeah, over the last 6 years, man, Shopify has been one of the fastest. It's good to partner with one of the fastest growing companies in the entire world, or like to niche down on one of the fastest growing companies in the entire world, and seeing how much growth Shopify's had in the last 6 years is completely mind blowing.
Yeah, and with niching down, I think a lot of people have fears about losing a market, or risk to an extent may increase. But I think in a situation like this, Shopify is clearly big. Tim Ferriss with the Build a Business competition 6 years ago with Toby really just skyrocketed the platform. So it was only going in the right direction.
So you got involved, started, built your own agency. How long have you been running Digital Darts?
For 6 years now.
6 years.
Yeah. Got a team of about eight people.
Awesome. Before we hopped on, I was kind of asking you some questions, and one of the things that you mentioned that you are interested in or getting really good at has been focusing on like processes and thinking about like running and building things in systems. And we didn't really get a chance to dive into it too much. So I'm going to ask you a question now. How has your mindset changed around processes, or what have you learned about processes and systems as your business has grown over the last 6 years?
Yeah, I've learned everything. Had to learn it from scratch. And so firstly, it's so influential in the quality of work that you deliver, whether it's sourcing a product and being able to have a product that's predictable, meets certain criteria, to, in my case, delivering a service that all the checkboxes get ticked. And so particularly starting off as a freelancer, so obviously didn't start off hiring anyone, and then to be able to transition to that first hire, which is such a big step for people, you need to have SOPs, standard operating procedures, flows, that's what I like to call them, to be able to help transition someone to replicate the same results that you're after. And I did not have that in place. It took me 2 more years, I would say, to consistently have that. And so I can see the clear contrast between the time involved in inputting training people to today, where new hire can get started, and I probably estimate 500% decrease in my time.
Wow.
In terms of just like weekly contact. That's just based on hours per day I know that I was spending with someone prior to someone recently. And to have an expectation that someone can deliver a result as good as you without describing the processes that you use to get that result it's absurd. It's actually unhealthy in a relationship. And then over time, just it's a living, breathing thing that constantly is refreshed. And yeah, each time you go through the process, it should be updated. So there's a lot more in there that I'm happy to talk about.
Oh, I want to key on what you just said, which is having an expectation that someone can deliver a result as good as you without any, I think you said training, or without any like instruction, is an unhealthy belief or relationship. I think that's interesting, because I think most people have that viewpoint or hope for that result when they're first starting to hire people.
Yeah, the hiring process is another big one, isn't it? Not having a step-by-step process to really understand what you're looking for and to qualify someone. And then as a business owner, you're left, if someone doesn't meet that criteria, which you can control, it's your responsibility, you put them in a bad position in a job they don't enjoy, and then you will have conflict with them. And that's on you as a business owner, as a hirer, as a manager. Yeah, it's been helpful in understanding responsibilities, and I think a lot of business owners don't perceive that.
So let's dive into that. I would love to hear some of the things that you do. So maybe on the flow standard operating procedures, how do you actually manage these, or do you use something like Google Docs to manage your standing operating procedures? How do you think about managing them, updating them? Who's responsible for them, and what does it look like for you?
So I having said all that, I know I'm not 100% perfect, but what is there is working, and it's a constant refinement. And so primarily it's Asana and leveraging their template system. for a bulk of tasks. And then within that, there's projects dedicated to more ad hoc things. And so in Asana, you can create a project for perhaps say Facebook ads. And you can, if there's certain Facebook issues, for example, points of contact, you can have a support task for that. And then within that, what that looks like is, it's taken me a long time to figure this out. And it's simple in the sense that there's 5 steps involved. And so there's the what, which is a description of the task. And a simple principle that I have of that is starting with a verb to describe that. And so it may be to set up the Facebook pixel in Shopify. And so the setup being the verb, and then that just defines the rest of the process for the action. And then the why. I found the why particularly important in working with someone when you're delegating work, because they may not have any awareness of what's going on. And so the why kind of slots that process, the task, into a bigger picture of how, like, why that is being done, as well as you can tie it often to some business impact, which I think is good. And then got what previously I only depended on, the how. And this is the nitty-gritty of the steps. And I typically like to just detail, bullet point list what that looks like, rather than depending on any external resources, because things drop out, things change, and you can't update it to suit what works for you.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's minutiae details within the how. Most important ones I reckon business owners should consider is have a saying that any fool should be able to use the flow, but hopefully no fool should, because of who's in your company. But even an expert will be thankful for what you've created. And so
what does Warren Buffett say? He's like, he likes businesses that are so simple a fool can run them, because eventually a fool will end up running it. I think that's one of his investing tenets, that eventually it'll get there. How do you keep them organized? Do you have like that's really interesting. And specifically the how side of it, or not the how, the why side of it. Because I think that is often neglected in standard operating procedures. It's like going straight into the how without defining the context of why this thing should be done. Because if you define the context of why this thing should be done, then often it can trigger somebody to maybe think a little bit more critically about the task that they're doing, and say, well, if I'm doing these checklists and this doesn't serve the why, well, maybe they shouldn't be done this way.
The purpose, yeah. Maybe something extraneous gets added to the how that doesn't suit that task, and a new process should be built out. And yeah, so to answer your question about how that is managed, just because I said there was 5 points, I'll just quickly touch on those other 2. Associated materials, so that's any external links or resources. Typically documentation, could be Shopify documentation, anything. And then when to mark complete is a huge one with, again, delegation, because things can get checked off easy and are actually done to your satisfaction, or there's a check that needs to be done beforehand. And so those 5 things, the why, what, why, how, associated material, and when to mark complete.
Cool.
That is a big step of how to manage the processes. And so in Asana, have projects designated to, say, Facebook ads, and then within that, there's individual tasks that suit all these different sections. And so one thing I like about Asana is that they have sections which you can help categorize things just at a glance. I've heard a lot of good things about Monday, and starting to believe a little bit more in Airtable, thanks to you, particularly hiring training that you gave away in the coalition. And yeah, still heavily dependent on Asana, but I know there are definitely other good systems working out there. I've heard a description saying that Asana is more engineered minded, while Monday tends to lean towards more creative, visual people. And if we're talking about processes, I can see why I'm probably more engineer minded.
That's interesting. Well, like I said, I got to know you through being a member of the coalition, and you mentioned before we hopped on that some of this process thinking has come from either the coalition or from listening to the podcast. What have you actually gotten out of being a member of the coalition?
Helping shift my mindset towards how to build a good business. I think each of us probably start a business with individual strengths, mine being marketing, growing e-commerce stores, particularly Shopify, but there's all these other areas of business where I think you can be deficient in. Other examples could be sales for some, separate from marketing, leadership, hiring, others legal, financial. So there's all these, business is unique in that you've got to challenge yourself in all these personal how you manage yourself to produce results in all these different areas. And understanding these other areas more clearly, I've been able to level up and become a more whole business person. And so processes is a part of people management. Particularly, I'm thinking of a training that is in there with Ryan from Arcona. That was another pivotal point in the financial pillar of my business. And so hiring people, I've always taken a shotgun approach, like a sense that I can feel this is a time to hire, but I don't know how my numbers add up, or what that growth looks like, what are my profit margins. And so I've never been burnt in that regard, but there was times where cash flow got very low, and it's all preventable with good financial planning. Another thing I would say is what we touched on before, the hiring process. It's a very intricate part of business, and it's unusual to peer into someone's business and understand the steps that they use. And so literally over your shoulder screen what each step and stage. And so I use that to the T. And stage one in being able to just filter in getting as many candidates as possible, and seeing that, ideally 200 candidates should be filtering into a position. A bit harder for maybe more qualified positions, but
sure,
it's always, it sets a benchmark and has led to some good hires. And then automating that filtering process. Last hire, I shifted towards using Airtable to be able to filter, populate databases from forms, and it's a smooth process. When things flow well, it brings a smile to my face.
It does.
And the unique thing about this is I'm currently building our second home, and when you get your mindset like this, you are able to see. I got this from Evan Pagan about 10 years ago, which didn't really click clearly if I wasn't adapting it, but what he's saying that about you're able to peer in someone else's business from an outsider, and you can pretty much tell their deficiency in systems and processes. That is frustrating. So building a new home right now, planning stage, sitting down for a house plan, I felt that frustration with not being taken through a sequence of questions to flush out what's important to me in a home. It was just share me what you want, and just that was it. My world has changed. It's infected my personal life.
Especially I find I've also built a house, and I think there's less of this type of stuff in the construction field, and it can be challenging if you are a very systems oriented person used to using tools like Asana and Airtable to manage tasks and projects. And if you're winging it can feel differently. It's funny you mentioned Eben Pagan. This weekend, I was at a talk with him and his wife, Annie, about relationships.
Oh, wow.
And just like a lot of the stuff that he talks about with building businesses, he's got his wife and him, they talk a lot about mental frameworks for successful relationships. And it's fascinating how a lot of the same things can transfer over into like tools that you can use in your relationship to get better outcomes. And they've done, that systems thinking has combined with his wife, who does a lot of, is just incredibly intuitive about relationships. And when you talk to her, it feels like she can knows everything about you very quickly. It's very interesting. And it's interesting to see how that combined with systems makes it so much more powerful. Systems and tools and capturing the way to think about processes to improve your relationship is exactly the same thing as in business. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that Evan Pagan's still pursuing these things. I haven't heard from him for a while, but I regarded him as a distant mentor.
For sure, same for me as well. It was one of the first people that I bought Wake Up Productive was the first info product I ever purchased and went through that.
Yeah,
Um,
yep,
and
likewise.
yeah, it was very helpful for me. But yeah, now his focus it's been moved mostly towards relationships. He still does some masterminds as well, but that's been one of the big things. It's really interesting. Thank you for sharing kind of how what you've learned from that. Let's talk about. I would love to talk about some current stuff. So you're kind of on the front lines. You mentioned iOS 14 and some of the changes. Most people have been doing fine, but some have not. Some have had some issues. What are the things that you're seeing at your agency that have been successful recently that you're excited about? Or I guess maybe even like when somebody comes and works with you, where do you typically start? Like, what are the common mistakes you're seeing or the common things that are being overlooked?
Yeah, I would say definitely the common mistakes shape the agency-client relationship. And so the biggest mistake is not having a picture, not having a healthy expectation of what a channel may do for your business. And so there's a huge spectrum of one type of Shopify business owner who expects you to be the heart, the brain of their business, everything, the savior for a business that has no real validation yet. And I define validation as in a proven marketing channel that you can scale, that is profitable. I think that comes about primarily from perhaps getting 80% of the way there in understanding what that looks like. So having competency so you can have intelligent conversations. And with that, I've seen it time and time again, business owners are able to assist. They're an asset to have from ignoring the industry knowledge side of things. It's to be able to have conversations, and it actually can build up the agency with further ideas and how to think about positioning, messaging, audiences. And so not having that foundation and expectation is definitely, I think, the biggest mistake. Second one would be a timeline. And so a bit similar in that, there's some businesses that can kick off and fire from day one. And it's always a dream to have, but it's not a reality for most businesses. You need not necessarily crack the funnel, but Facebook works off data, and sometimes that can fire straight away. Other times that takes time, particularly Google Ads. You may need to narrow down your search keywords to focus on what matters, and you need to actually get through the data first if you don't have anything initially to begin with.
Yeah. When you look at iOS 14, and I guess even today, like yesterday, we're recording this in June, there was iOS 15 announced and some interesting privacy changes. How do you, as an agency, how do you feel about some of these changes that are coming down the pipe? And are they something that people need to be concerned about? Are they something that you feel not as concerned about? Where do you stand on it?
Well, first reaction I had, and first good reaction everyone can have, is tear out the hair. It's one of the most stressful points I've had. 15 months since COVID, where March of 2020, where e-commerce businesses took a whole hit. Yeah, so since that, this is definitely the biggest challenge I had in assisting businesses. And I know, speaking to a lot of other e-commerce business owners, the channel is important for them, Facebook ads, then it has been a huge challenge for them. There's a genuine uncertainty around it with how to handle iOS 14. And I think anyone who knows what to do exactly, who is confident, who is pronouncing a methodology that is the secret, that a data collection method, there's certainly things you can do, but there is no secret sauce. Like this is the technology. It is made to not give you that. That's a good thing to keep in mind, as well as just the uncertainty that the time brings. And I think I found a lot of clients to be patient, which is very thankful for. One of the best steps forward is really understanding attribution, as well as an estimated return on ad spend figure. These are kind of two fundamental business things that have just, I think everyone should learn about, because it makes you a better business owner, because that's what the world of business marketing looked like prior to, the luxury of flicking on a Google ad and seeing make $3 from a buck spend.
For sure. Do you have anything any interesting apps, tools, or things you're excited about recently? Books, things that have helped you on your journey?
Yeah. I would say one is Traction, which gifted from you. And that is quite similar to a lot of what we started off our call with in thinking about a better business framework. It's funny in that this is how business is done, no matter what you're in, whether you're an agency, if you're a Shopify business owner, if you've never sold online and you're a manufacturer, like, this is business. And I've studied business at a top university in Australia 20 years ago, and so it's funny in that regard. So Traction it has been fantastic, and another one which is actually just because I'm reading through your books at the moment that you've gifted, Greg Crabtree's.
Yeah, Simple Number, Straight Talk, Big Profits.
Yeah, so they're very quite similar in that regard, those two books. And yeah, so from a business standpoint, they've been fantastic. And I've always been a lover of Peter Drucker's.
I have it in my bag right next to me here. I feel like those books are all books that allow you to make business easier, right? I mean, you've got 8 people on your team right now, I think is what you said, right?
Correct, yeah.
Is it easier or more challenging to run your business with 8 people than it was with 1 person or 2 people?
Yeah, great question. I never envisioned hiring a person at all because, and this is understandable, at the time of being a sole business owner, I saw what I was doing, and then I saw someone else coming on board and being another variable that I have to manage, which is true, but managing them like I manage myself is always going to be chaos. And so growth just happened, and it was a direction. I was fortunate in that my sister was a bit of an easy gateway to hiring, and so she ticked a lot of variables, and this was 5 years ago. That was less intimidating in that regard. But yeah, over time, where I'm now to back then, it's without a doubt having a supportive team is emotionally, it's less stressful. It's more freeing for time. Better results happen because they're empowered. They've got the skills, they've got the resources, they've got the processes to execute what is needed. With that comes sanity and a good business.
That's awesome. Joshua, thanks, man, for hopping on here with me and chatting. It's been super interesting, and it's good to connect and learn more about what you're doing. If anybody's interested, if you want to direct somebody to connect with you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way would be just to go to digitaldarts.com.au. Yeah, all this, if you want to connect socially, all the socials are on the website. There's a free course you can sign up to, which can help you grow your Shopify store. Joshua, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Cool. Austin, appreciate being able to chat with you finally and be able to talk about the nuts and bolts of... For sure. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Austin.